Victoria had always believed her marriage to Ethan was built on trust and understanding, but as the years passed, the spark that once ignited their relationship began to dim. Ethan, a dedicated executive, worked long hours to provide for their comfortable life, but it came at the cost of their emotional connection. Victoria, once the devoted wife, found herself drifting into an unfamiliar, restless space. The vibrant woman she had once been, the one who cherished the small moments and playful surprises, seemed to be slipping away. Instead, she felt more like a forgotten accessory, quietly standing by while Ethan pursued his career. In their home, the silence between them grew louder with each passing day. Victoria longed for the excitement, the passion that had once defined their love. She began to question her role, feeling more like a spectator in her own life. She sacrificed her own dreams and ambitions to support his, but now, in the stillness of the evenings when Ethan was away at work, she wondered if she had lost herself in the process. As the monotony continued, the gnawing feeling of dissatisfaction grew into a quiet desperation for something, anything, that would make her feel alive again. One fateful evening, while attending a high-profile company gala with Ethan, Victoria found herself drawn to Alex, Ethan's charismatic boss. He was everything Ethan was not: intense, magnetic, and effortlessly confident. Their first conversation was brief, but the chemistry was undeniable. Alex had a way of making her feel seen, truly seen, as if he could read the depths of her yearning, the quiet dissatisfaction she had kept hidden for so long. Over the next few weeks, their encounters became more frequent. What started as polite conversations at company events quickly shifted to stolen moments of intimacy, lingering glances, subtle touches, and shared laughs that seemed to breathe life into Victoria's soul in ways her marriage no longer did. With Alex, there was no pretense, no expectations, just the raw, intoxicating thrill of being wanted. He became her escape from the suffocating routine of her daily life. The adrenaline of secrecy only fueled the fire between them, and Victoria found herself looking forward to their meetings with growing anticipation. But with each passing encounter, the line between professional decorum and temptation blurred. The chemistry between them was electric, and for the first time in a long while, Victoria felt alive, desired, and powerful. She knew it was dangerous. She knew it was wrong. But the pull was too strong to resist. And so, she dove deeper into the affair, no longer able to control the tide that was sweeping her away. As weeks passed, Victoria's relationship with Alex grew bolder, each moment more electrifying than the last. The stolen glances, the whispered conversations, the secret rendezvous at upscale hotels, everything was wrapped in an intoxicating layer of secrecy. Victoria was no longer the dutiful wife she had once been. In Alex's presence, she felt like someone else, someone powerful and desired. He awakened parts of her she thought had been long forgotten, the hunger for excitement, the yearning for passion. Their encounters, though fleeting, were filled with a wild, reckless energy that made her feel alive in ways her marriage to Ethan no longer did. It was a dangerous game, but the stakes only seemed to make the experience more thrilling. Each touch, each kiss, carried a risk, but with Alex, that risk felt worth it. Victoria had spent so many years tending to Ethan's needs, sacrificing her own desires in the process, that the sudden attention from someone like Alex was a heady escape from the ordinary. He seemed to see through her, past the facade of a loving wife, into the woman who had long been neglected. As their affair deepened, so did her internal struggle. Guilt gnawed at her constantly, but it was drowned out by the excitement and longing that Alex stirred within her. Every stolen moment felt like an oasis in a desert, and she couldn't help but return, again and again, knowing that soon, the consequences would catch up to her. The facade of normalcy was beginning to crack. Victoria's world, once filled with routine and predictability, had slowly unraveled. The distance between her and Ethan had only grown since she began her affair with Alex, yet she couldn't seem to stop herself from seeking him out. What had started as fleeting moments of desire had become an overwhelming addiction, a need to feel seen, wanted, and alive. Every encounter with Alex was like a drug, intoxicating, euphoric, and dangerous. She found herself sneaking away from work early to meet him, exchanging lingering glances with him across crowded rooms, all the while trying to push down the guilt that simmered just beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Ethan remained oblivious, caught up in his own world of work, as his passion for their marriage had long faded. But Victoria could feel the weight of the lies building, like a pressure she could no longer contain. Every time Ethan kissed her goodbye in the morning or asked her how her day had been, she couldn't shake the crushing weight of the secret she was carrying. She was torn between the life she had built with him and the chaos that Alex represented. One evening, after another rendezvous with Alex, Victoria returned home to find Ethan unusually early. The house was quiet, and her pulse quickened. She tried to push away the fear that bubbled inside her, the fear of being caught, of losing everything she had once taken for granted. But the truth was inescapable, and soon, it would come crashing down. Victoria's heart raced as she stood in the dimly lit hallway, her fingers trembling against the doorknob. She could hear Ethan in the kitchen, humming softly as he prepared dinner, completely unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The weight of her choices pressed down on her chest like a heavy stone. She had tried to ignore the growing gap between them, the disconnection that had only deepened over the years. Yet, despite all her efforts, she had found solace in Alex's arms. With Alex, she didn't feel invisible. With him, she felt seen, desired, and alive in a way that Ethan had stopped making her feel years ago. But now, the lie had grown too large, too consuming to hide. Each stolen moment with Alex felt like an act of defiance, an unspoken rejection of everything she had built with Ethan. Yet, every time she returned to their home, to Ethan's familiar embrace, guilt would crash over her like a wave, and the cycle would begin again. Victoria had started to believe that perhaps she didn't deserve the quiet love Ethan gave her. She was haunted by the fear of being exposed, knowing that her marriage would shatter under the weight of her betrayal. The worst part wasn't the fear of losing Ethan, though, it was the dread of losing herself in the chaos, of becoming a woman defined by her secret instead of her truth. Time was running out, and she could feel the inevitable confrontation creeping closer. Victoria sat at the edge of the bed, the cool sheets brushing against her skin as the quiet hum of the night enveloped her. Ethan was in the living room, his presence familiar and soothing, yet so distant. She could feel the tension between them, an invisible thread pulling them apart despite their attempts to go through the motions of normal life. The weight of her secret, a secret she had kept from him for so long, pressed on her chest, making each breath feel shallow and strained. The affair with Alex had started as a spark, a brief moment of excitement that had grown into a dangerous flame, one that threatened to consume her whole life. Every day felt like a delicate balancing act, lying to Ethan, hiding the truth behind closed doors, all while trying to keep up the facade of a perfect marriage. The guilt was suffocating, but so was the longing she felt when she thought of Alex. With him, she was not just a wife or a mother, she was a woman rediscovering herself, feeling alive in ways that Ethan no longer seemed to see. But as the days passed, the lines between right and wrong became blurred. She had convinced herself that Alex was the escape she needed, the answer to her restlessness. But with each passing moment, she knew deep down that she was playing a dangerous game, one that could ruin everything she held dear. Victoria sat in the dimly lit kitchen, the soft clink of her coffee mug breaking the silence. Her mind raced with conflicting emotions, and her thoughts kept returning to the moments she had shared with Alex, the stolen glances, the whispered conversations, the intense moments of passion that had consumed her in a way she hadn't felt in years. It had been a whirlwind, one that she never expected but had plunged into with reckless abandon. But as much as the affair had given her a sense of excitement, it had also stolen something from her, a peace she once had in her marriage, a quiet confidence that had vanished the moment her heart strayed. As Victoria stared out the window, watching the rain tap against the glass, she couldn't shake the growing realization that she was living a double life, constantly on edge. The secret weighed heavily on her, suffocating her every move. Ethan had grown distant, consumed by his work, leaving her to manage the emotional turmoil alone. At first, she had convinced herself it was temporary, that things would settle. But now, with each passing day, she felt the distance between them widen. The guilt gnawed at her, eating away at her sense of right and wrong, until she wasn't sure where one identity ended and the other began. The truth, as much as she tried to ignore it, was catching up with her. And soon, it would all come crashing down. Victoria couldn't escape the growing tension that lingered between her and Ethan. The house, once filled with the warmth of familiarity and shared love, had become a cold battlefield of silence. Each day felt like walking through a fog, where the weight of her choices pressed heavily on her chest. She had never imagined herself in this position, so far removed from the woman she once was, the woman who had been so in love, so hopeful. Yet here she was, caught between two worlds, the safe, predictable life with Ethan and the reckless passion with Alex that made her feel alive again, but also undeniably guilty. At work, Victoria threw herself into her responsibilities, hoping that burying herself in deadlines and meetings might give her the distance she needed to breathe. But even there, She found herself distracted, haunted by Alex's smile, his presence, the heat of his touch. Every glance she exchanged with him felt electric, full of unspoken promises and longings. She would catch herself daydreaming, lost in the idea of what could be, and then the reality of her betrayal would snap her back. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the person she was becoming, the lies she was telling, the crumbling foundation of her marriage. The fear of exposure lurked in the shadows, suffocating her, but the excitement of her secret kept pulling her deeper into the abyss. Every choice felt like a trap, and the more she struggled, the more she felt trapped. Victoria's world seemed to spin faster as her secrets piled up, one on top of the other. The affair with Alex had become a dark, swirling vortex that she couldn't escape. Despite every effort to keep her marriage intact, she couldn't deny that she was drowning in the web of lies she'd spun. At night, the silence between her and Ethan was suffocating. He had become a stranger, someone she hardly recognized. Their once comfortable routine had devolved into avoidance, the cracks in their connection growing wider by the day. Ethan was still oblivious to her betrayal, but every glance he shot her way felt like a silent accusation. At work, the tension with Alex became unbearable. The stolen moments, the fleeting glances, every second with him felt like it was both a reminder of the life she was living and the life she yearned for. But as her guilt deepened, so did the feeling of restlessness. She couldn't escape the internal battle. What was more important, the man who had stood by her for years, or the man who made her feel alive again? Every time she saw Alex, she felt a rush of adrenaline, but every time she faced Ethan, a pang of regret clenched her heart. Victoria couldn't run from herself anymore. She needed to decide, but the fear of losing both men was paralyzing. Each passing day made her feel more disconnected from the woman she once was, and from the life she once loved. The moment Victoria had feared most was finally upon her. The confrontation with Ethan was inevitable. Her mind raced as she paced in their living room, the weight of her decisions pressing down like 1,000 pounds on her chest. She had thought she could keep the affair hidden, keep the charade going just a little longer, but the truth had a way of clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deep she buried it. Ethan had grown suspicious, his quiet observations had built up over the last few weeks, and tonight, he finally confronted her. When he entered the room, his eyes weren't filled with anger, not at first. Instead, they were full of pain, and that hurt more than anything. Ethan was a man who had trusted her, loved her, and she had betrayed him in the most unforgivable way. As he laid the evidence out before her, his voice steady, but each word a dagger in her heart, she realized there was no more hiding. The guilt that had gnawed at her every day now rushed to the surface, choking her, suffocating her with every breath. "I deserve better than this," Ethan said, his voice cold, breaking her spirit. In that moment, Victoria knew their marriage was irrevocably shattered. The love they once shared had been suffocated by the lies, the secrecy, and the weight of her own choices. And as she looked into his eyes, all she could feel was the crushing finality of it all. No more excuses, no more hope. Only the raw, undeniable truth. The days after the confrontation were a blur of tension and silence, each one dragging on in painful isolation. Victoria felt like a prisoner in her own home, the guilt of her actions wrapping around her like chains, preventing her from moving freely. Ethan had withdrawn completely, his cold distance a stark reminder of the betrayal she had inflicted on him. The man she had once known, her partner, her confidant, was now a stranger, and it was all her fault. She spent sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every choice that led them here. Ethan had retreated to the guest room, and their shared space felt like a cavern, echoing with the absence of the warmth that used to fill it. Victoria tried to talk to him, to apologize, to explain how much she regretted the affair, but the words felt hollow, inadequate. Ethan wouldn't even look at her, his anger too raw, too fresh. The silence between them grew heavier each day, suffocating any attempt at reconciliation. But even in the depth of this emotional wreckage, Victoria knew something had to change. She couldn't keep living like this, paralyzed by regret and fear. With trembling hands and a racing heart, she picked up the phone, dialing the one number she had avoided for so long, her closest friend, Lily. She needed help, someone who could guide her through this mess and help her face the consequences of her choices, even if it meant unraveling the life she had built. As the weeks dragged on, the weight of Victoria's decisions pressed heavier with each passing day. The affair had shattered her marriage, but it wasn't just the betrayal that left her reeling, it was the realization that her own insecurities had driven her to seek validation in the arms of another. She had felt invisible for so long, caught in the relentless pursuit of status and success, that she hadn't noticed how much she had neglected the very thing that once fueled her, the love and connection she shared with Ethan. Now, in the aftermath, she had lost both, the spark of their relationship and the trust they had built. Victoria spent her days wrestling with the gnawing emptiness that had replaced the excitement and rush she had once felt with Alex. It was a fleeting thrill, a temporary escape from the void she had been filling for years. But now, with the destruction left in her wake, she could see clearly. Her marriage was worth fighting for, but she had no idea how to begin the long, difficult journey back. She wasn't sure Ethan would ever forgive her. And yet, she couldn't give up. She owed it to herself and to him to rebuild. But the path was fraught with obstacles, her own guilt, his anger, and the weight of the broken trust. All she could do was start. And she knew it would take time, patience, and the unwavering belief that love, if truly nurtured, could heal even the deepest of wounds. As Victoria continued to navigate the ruins of her marriage, she realized that the deepest betrayal wasn't just the affair, it was the way she had lost herself in the process. For so long, she had defined her worth by what others saw in her, by her ability to give and give without ever truly receiving. She had let the demands of her career, the pressures of maintaining an image of perfection, and the void she felt from Ethan's emotional absence guide her choices. But now, with everything falling apart, she couldn't help but wonder, had she forgotten who she really was? The woman who once had dreams, passions, and a sense of self outside of her roles as a wife and an executive. The journey to self-discovery was painful. It meant facing the harsh truth about her actions, but it also meant accepting responsibility for the part she had played in her own misery. Slowly, Victoria began to reclaim the pieces of herself she had abandoned. She started to focus on her own needs, her own happiness, rather than constantly seeking validation through others. And while the road to healing with Ethan seemed uncertain, Victoria knew that true growth, whether in relationships or in life, began with the ability to forgive herself. She wasn't ready to give up on the love she had with him, but now, for the first time in years, she was learning to love herself again. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to lose ourselves in the roles we play for others, whether as partners, employees, or friends. But as the story of Victoria reminds us, true happiness and fulfillment start with self-awareness and self-love. It's important to take a step back, reflect on our own needs, and not let external pressures dictate our worth. If you feel disconnected or overwhelmed, don't hesitate to prioritize your emotional health. Relationships thrive when both people are grounded in who they are. So invest in your own well-being, and allow that self-love to radiate into every area of your life.